Hey there folks, it's me TheTacticalBrit, and today I'm here talking about Battlefield 5 and talking a little bit about playstyles and how you can improve your game. Now today's footage is purely Mercury based, but it focuses on an aspect of the game that I feel is often underlooked by most players in terms of how they play and how they play aggressively and what they should really be looking for in terms of their movement to play well and do well in certain situations. I think honestly one of my most successful playstyles in Battlefield is genuinely just being a mad bastard, with not really much cohesion to anything I do beyond just trying to do things that people don't anticipate. And this sounds very strange and it sounds almost, a bit counterproductive in ways, but I tend to sort of aim for situations that players just aren't anticipating in any shape or form, and that in turn is how I manage to get successful strings of gameplay, like some of the stuff you're seeing today. I never do the straight head-on route. I really don't understand why people do it, because, meat grinder situations like that are never beneficial to you as an individual player. When people run into each other head-on like they do in most Battlefield scenarios, I think I'd say at the moment, it just ends up creating this churning wall of people where it's probably more or less going to be decided by whoever throws a grenade or explosive in the right situation, as opposed to 1v1 gun situations or catching people on the drop. And as you can see in almost all of the gameplay here today, there is a huge focus here on trying to get in and around the back of enemies and then flanking inward and being incredibly aggressive with what I'm doing. Now there are four key components to this sort of playstyle that I like to do, and I'm going to run over them quickly just to give you guys an idea of where my headspace is at, and how I'm sort of prioritizing what I do in these situations to take on targets. It can be, in a way, quite confusing, and sometimes I totally understand that the overall outlook of this thing is to be a mad bastard, but there is effectively a sort of a method to the madness, so to speak. So to begin with, making a flanking route. Now this is one of the key components of how I play, and there is a pretty good method to this. Now obviously flanking routes never head on. You never want to go up front and personal. You're looking for the side routes around the map that will let you take the long way in and get in and behind enemies. Now the obvious mistake that a lot of people make in this situation is that they're not willing to go into territories that they feel enemies will be in, but more importantly as well, and this is probably the biggest one, is that in most of these flanking route situations, people tend to use terrain that makes them so incredibly obvious. You'll notice in most of the flanking routes I take today in this video that I'm aiming for low gullies, lots of vegetation, crouch running, and doing everything I possibly can to conceal my position. Because if you start early off, you may notice that flanking routes just never go well. The second you fire your gun, it becomes obviously clear to everybody in the area that you are now in the area as an enemy player, especially if you're on a capture point where they will actually visually see from the capture flag that you do exist. So it makes a lot of sense to get yourself into a prime position and not sort of fire off far too early in order to get into that location and make an effective play. You'll see today that I tend to get in behind compounds, using things like small alleyways and gullies, and then jump over the wall and sort of scout out the situation and go for an aggressive push from there. And just those simple kills that I get in those situations are enough to allow my teammates to move on to the objective and make a difference. The next critical component is understanding your position in relation to what's going on around you. Now, when you make these aggressive pushes, and more importantly when you find yourself behind enemy lines and pushing into an objective from a location where typically enemies themselves would come from, you have to be very aware of the fact that that is the situation you're in. And you'll notice often in this gameplay that I end up hugging a lot of walls or getting into buildings and using them as corner cover temporarily, because I am aware of the fact that now that I'm actively on a location and actively causing damage, there will be people around me who are looking to fight back, and there will be people around me who are willing to sort of look around themselves and try and take me out. And that kind of visual line of sight and understanding where those deployment points are for your enemy players will make you understand that when you start your offensive situation on these flanking routes, you need to be aware of this stuff, because otherwise they will just cream you in a matter of seconds. And if you aren't hugging walls, and if you aren't actively looking around and preparing for the ongoing situation, these people will be coming for you, then you might end up being in a lot of trouble very quickly. The third part of this offensive stance is really choosing a weapon that suits you and makes you feel as though you're in a good offensive position. I for one tend to use the MP40, or often I will use the Thompson machine gun, and the reason for this is because one of the weapons, like the MP40, will give you great accuracy, and the Thompson will give you lots of power in close quarters situations. You really want to choose a weapon like this. I tend to play the medic for this class, not because I'm getting lots of revives, but purely because I need to heal regularly and I need a gun that can do good work in up close and personal situations. And really for me, choosing something comfortable, I do switch this around a lot. I don't end up just sticking with these weapons all the time. There will be times where I switch to a Swomy depending on the map, and there will be times where I switch to different weapons as well, like the MP34. But I really do recommend the SMG and medic class if you're going to play this aggressive style. You need as much health as humanly possible, and the smoke grenades are an also key component of how this works. The next part of this playstyle is understanding when to disengage and how to do it. I find myself regularly in situations where I know I'm not going to win, and I tend to have two sort of tactics for getting out of these situations. The first one is a waiting game. You'll notice sometimes I tend to sort of sit in a corner and just let things play out for a little while, let things calm down, and almost in a way let people forget that I'm there. And the final one is a confusion tactic. This is really important because you will find in most games like Battlefield 5 that smoke grenades really do disorientate players, and if you can just lay down a bunch of them, lob a few around on the ground, it's really going to confuse a lot of the players in the base and in the situation. So if you can get out of there using that and get into those places using smoke grenades, it's definitely a tactic I would warrant and recommend. And one thing I really do recommend using smoke grenades for is not necessarily firing them on the places that you're going to be, but firing them in the places that you know people are. And this kind of sounds confusing, but say for example you're approaching an objective and you can tell that there are people up on a hilltop, you should fire a smoke grenade between you and the people on the hilltop and more towards them than towards you. And this will really allow you to navigate the objective without people seeing you, and it's just a really simple way of cutting off sight lines and allowing you to get in and behind situations without people knowing. Now the final part of this playstyle is going to sound a little bit dumb, and it's going to sound a little bit vague, but you really just have to be ridiculously overpowered and aggressive when you play this way. Like, you need to be going in for the kill every single time with zero hesitation, and you'll notice in all of this gameplay there will be times where I'm up against 2 or 3 opponents and I will just keep spraying because that's what this playstyle is mandated for. You know, these people will not expect you being there. They won't anticipate that a player is as far behind enemy lines as somebody like yourself, and if you can get into there, you could just completely destroy them. This playstyle for most situations is a playstyle where you will have the drop on most opponents most of the time when you get into an engagement. And having that kind of benefit and having that kind of situation is always positive in Battlefield. You know, that split second or that fraction of a second difference can really be something that tips the balance in your favor for winning gun battles, especially in a game where TTK can often be a frustrating point for most players because they die very quickly. So that combination of having the drop on an opponent, always entering engagements with the most health as a medic class, and more importantly just being very smash and grab and getting into it is something that I highly recommend in every sense of the word. This playstyle will suit most players, but it really does require just a little bit of tactical awareness, a little bit of presence awareness, and just understanding how enemy opponents think in order to make a difference as to what's going on in your surroundings. So folks, that's about it from me today, TheTacticalBrit. As you're watching this video, actually, I'm probably on my way, or partially getting ready to be on my way to EA Play over in Los Angeles, which is super exciting, and a huge shout out to the guys over at EA for sending me out to go and see what is happening with Battlefield. I can't reveal anything that's been said because, well, I don't really know anything that's happening at the event presently, but I am being told that there will be lots of capture, recording, and potentially live streams on the show floor for us to get involved in, which is very exciting, and this means that we can bring you guys content whilst I am over in LA, and I think I'm there for like about 6 days, give or take. So most of that will be focused on Battlefield, seeing as I don't really have any other interest in anything at EA Play beyond maybe Star Wars. So expect lots of content whilst I'm over in Los Angeles, and I will see you guys very soon. As always folks, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you again in the next video.